hour-long tutorial, you will learn how to implement in React a new version of Firebase, which is version 9, create, read, update, and delete functionality. Also, don't waste time setting up boilerplate for this tag because I will show you how to do that using a template. And one very in-demand and useful skill that you'll pick up and learn basics of during this video is TypeScript. I also wanted to say thank you for the support. I received a lot of positive feedback on my Firebase Authentication video, and that is also one of the reasons that I decided to shoot the CRUD functionality in Firebase and React tutorial. And if you haven't seen Authentication 1, make sure to go ahead, watch it. And if you enjoy my videos, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Now, without further ado, let's get started. We are getting started by going to Firebase console, clicking add new project. In here, we're gonna give this project a name. I'm gonna name it React CRUD and continue. Once it's set up, I'm not gonna enable Google Analytics for this one, so turn off and create. Continue, it will take us to the project on the dashboard, and we select web because we're setting up this on a web. We give this app a nickname. So let's do tutorial and register app. Now it's loading configurations for us that we can use and to connect our app to the Firebase. So let's copy both this install command and the configuration. So getting that because we need to install the module, and let's continue. If you don't have Firebase tools installed globally, open up the terminal and install using this command on the screen. To set up the project, we'll use Vite. It's like create React app alternative, and it also on their page and documentation, they have this different kinds of templates, and we're gonna use the Firebase one. So I'm just gonna scroll down, so it should be view React. Okay, yep. This one I'm gonna also link this template in the description, so you guys can easily just go there. So I have already created, but you can create a new repo, and this will redirect you to this page, give description, and in the end, there's a button here, create repo from template. And once it's created, you can copy the code. I'll also link URL to my repo in case you get lost somewhere during this tutorial, you'll be able to follow the code. So let's copy this. So let's do git clone and the URL of the repository. It's gonna clone into it. Then we have to do cd react Firebase tutorial, and we can install the dependencies. This project is using yarn, so we're just gonna run yarn. And once we open the project, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna paste the Firebase configuration that we copied from the console and start updating env local file. So API key, copying and pasting that. Database URL, I don't think we need that. We also need to update this TypeScript file that defines types of the environment variables. So let's continue pasting. Now we have project ID. Next up is storage bucket. So that URL needs to be moved over here. Messenger sender ID, that's line number 7, and app ID. So for the measurement ID, I think in version 9 that's optional. Also, we don't need it for the services we're going to use, so I'm going to remove that. Also go into the TypeScript file, vita.env.dts, and remove it from there, and the database URL. Let's save this and remove this line from local file. Also remove this extra code from the Firebase that we pasted. A service name that we can pick whatever we want to name it. And let's see, we can say something like React CRUD. Saving the file. That was it for Firebase setup. Now we are ready to run the application, and we do that by going to terminal and running the command yarn dev. That starts our application on this port. We click that, takes it to the browser, and we can see our main page with authentication and the tech stack and the header at the top. To be able to use that sign in with Google, we have to go back to Firebase console and enable authentication. So here we click get started, and then we pick all the providers that we want to use. For example, we have Google here, we can click it, enable, and then it will ask you for like a support email. And so select that. This tutorial, we're not gonna go over authentication. If you want, I have another tutorial. It's gonna show up on the top right corner link. You can go ahead and learn about like functions and how to use them, but some like basic sign-in methods with Google is already set up in part of a template, so you can just use it straight from the box. And then this is how you add another provider. For example, email and password, you can just enable from the console and save it. Next thing, we also have to enable our Firestore database. So let's select that from the side and create a database. In here, we select to start in a test mode, which make sure you change it before you go to production. Otherwise, everybody has access to your database with the key. Now collection ID, I'm going to name this collection tools. We can think of collection as, for example, like a table in like, for example, SQL type databases, and adding 3 fields: title, description, URL. For all 3 of them, I'm going to select type as string and adding in some values. So adding like data into this collection is very simple from the Firebase UI, as you can see here. So we have collection, and the document itself is the object, like an instance of the data. And I'm gonna add a few more just to like have more than one tool show up and then fetch later on the page. So just adding, once again, for all this 3, I'm gonna add title, description, and URL to the tool. Let's open the index file from screens folder, and inside this file I'm just going to delete all this extra code. So we have a dialog. I'm gonna minimize it from here so I know what I'm deleting. So all this code for the screen, and also the dialog, we don't need it right now. So let's remove that, just leave like one with the class minimum screen. That means that it's going to expand on the full screen. Next thing we have to do is we have to use Firestore hook that's defined in the Firebase file inside the lib folder. So let's go ahead. Here is on the side you can see the library folder, and from there use Firestore and lib, and also not the store, but Firebase is the name of the file. Next, we will create a state where once we pull our data from the Firebase, we can store it. So I'm going to remove the states which we won't need, and constant tools is going to be the name of the state, and then set tools that equals to use state. On the line second, we already have use state imported from React. Make sure if you don't, that you add the import statement at the top. And by default, this would be an empty array. We also need to type this data coming back, right? So let's create the type using the keyword type, and then the name of the type, which would be tool. It's capitalized, as you can see. Here we define all the fields that we already added from the Firebase console. So those were the 3. Title, that is of type string, description also, and URL is going to be string. And here what we can do is, where we created use state, we can tell our application this state is going to be array of type tool. So that's what it's gonna store, so it knows what to expect when the data comes back. Now let's create a reference to our hook. So to use hook, we need to define it using a variable. So let's do constant firestore and then equals to use firestore. Afterwards, we can use the functions that the hook provides. So starting off, we want to get the data when the page loads. So that's where use effect comes in. As a dependency, we pass empty array. That means that it will only run when the page initially loads or when the React component mounts, which is like same thing in our case. Inside here, we define asynchronous function. We name it fetch data. And here we write definition to fetch the data from the Firebase. So first we need to refer to the collection that we created. So constant to tools collection, that equals to collection. That is function coming from Firebase SDK. And we need to pass firestore and we need to pass the name of the collection, as you can see, tools. It's same as we defined inside the Firebase console when we created our new Firestore instance. So inside we created a collection, that's the name, and on the top right corner here you can see use Firestore hook and how it is defined. You don't need to copy this code as it comes as a part of the template. It's inside a lib folder in the Firebase TS file, and just want to show quickly so that you understand how what function it is, and it's calling also get firestore from Firebase Firestore like a npm module and creating that hook, and then that is exported and used here inside. So yeah, when we pass that reference to the collection. So next up, we're gonna define a query and think of query as the read part of a CRUD functionality. So inside query, we have to pass the collection against which this query is going to run. And then we can store the data in constant query snapshot that comes back from get docs. So get docs is basically tells us, get me all the docs that's inside this collection. And we create a new constant which would store this fetch data, and we define it. We already have a type for tool, so we're gonna tell, oh, this is array of tool. Initially it is empty, and we're gonna take query snapshot and map it out. So for each document, we wanna store it, push it to the fetch data, and we will take, let's add also type ID and store that on our client side as well. So push ID, get the doc ID, and then also the rest of the data, take that in an object and store it as a tool inside our fetch data array. Once we have that, we are ready to take query snapshot and save it in our state. So that would be set tools. And finally, we have to actually call this fetch data function, because so far what we did is we defined it, and we're getting the red underline because we need to import this functions of collection, query, and get docs at the top from Firebase Firestore module, which is already was installed as a part of this template. And also we need to import use effect hook from React. Okay, now before we move on, let's quickly console log our data to make sure that we are able to successfully fetch it. So console table, and then we're gonna move on to the browser, open up our console, and reload the page. That should trigger the API call, and we can see the array here is loaded with our 4 items in the database. Now we can remove this and start building a UI. So we will create like a table that will wrap and load the data. So let's stretch it over to full width. So that would be using table class and width full. Then we're gonna start by listing our heads. So thead is what wraps the header, and then we'll have one row. So tr is the row, and each cell is denoted by th. So we need we have currently 3 fields. So 3 of those. I'm just gonna move this out, and the first one is title, then we have description, and finally it would be the URL. Yeah, we can name this link, and now in the body we will take our tool's state that we have and map it out, because every tool is gonna have its own row with its fields. So let's pass inside map, take the tool and create a table row in here. So inside the row we're gonna fetch these fields dynamically. So TD is the one that stands for like the table cell for the data. For key we're gonna pass the ID, because every tool that gets created in Firebase has a unique ID. So first one we have tool title, second tool description, and finally we're gonna, let me copy this and paste it, that would be the tool URL. So let's reload, and here's our table, and we can now update some styling of it. So I'm gonna move this to the side and add some classes here. Backgrounds, like as a reminder, we're using Tailwind for the classes, so we don't have to write CSS separately. And I'm gonna also change the width of the table, set it to max width 5 pixel. As for background color, let's have that text slate of 50, and this let's change to darker, but it does not so affect if you add styling to table. So let's separately then add it to TD, so the data, adding classes to data. So background slate 800, border, and then border color would be slate 700. Let's also change to table head, where we have the name of the columns. We're gonna make this a little darker, so it would be slate 900. So here's the result of the styling. This looks a little bit better. Now we can add an UI so that user can type it in and create a new tool. So for that one, I'm gonna create a new class, make it a flex, and then start adding an input fields there. So all the types would be text. Placeholder, first one, like usually we have a title. And let's add some class name, also set the background. Let me move this so you can guys see more clearly my code. Set the background to transparent, add some border, and then the border color is going to be slate 700, so we can see it on the screen. Some styles for focus. When it's focused, it's going to have a ring around it, but no outline. So that's what we have. Let's add a little bit of a padding and then make it rounded. Now I'm gonna copy this 3 times for rest of our fields and just change like placeholder. And later on we're also gonna have different values for every single one of them. And finally we need to add, let's first, before we move on, some margins so that there's some space in between those inputs. And I'm just gonna copy this on the second and the third. Okay, so now let's wrap this as a form because we have this input fields, and finally our form can have a submit button. So let's add that. Button type would be submit, and then as a label it would be add new tool. Let's do some styling for the button. This I'm gonna set is as a purple one, so border, like it will have a darker purple border, some padding. I'm also gonna make this rounded for consistency, and background, as I mentioned, would be lighter purple. Let's add some opacity. So on the background we're gonna add like 30%, and then we're gonna make opacity more on the hover, so it will be darker, and we're gonna fix that background showing up as white. Also let's make text white so it is more visible. And what we can also do, let's add a margin so it has space with other inputs. When I type it in, the text is not showing up because the text color is darker. So let's update that on all of our inputs. So I'm gonna copy that text slate 50 and paste it on our inputs. One more thing we can do is that opacity change is more smoother. We can add this class transition opacity, so it will make it more smooth. Now moving back to our code, let's create a class where we can store this form data. So constant input data set input data, and it equals to use state. This is a good concept to know in TypeScript partial types. So because user will start updating this state as users start typing, some of the fields are going to be empty. So when they are typing title, they might not have type description. That's why we can't have this type defined as a tool, but we can have it as a partial tool. What partial does is that it takes a type and makes all of its fields optional, because right now the tool fields are not required. So that's good to use. Now we can create a handle input change function. This is going to take a field and a value. Field would define which one it is a title, description, or URL, which one we have to set. And then we call set input data hook. We pass the previous data that was already there, and then we take field dynamically, set it to value. Now here we can define an enum. Enum is convenient to use when we have only few values. So in case we're gonna have title, description, and URL, this is the only 3 types. Actually, we have 4. One more is ID. 4 types of what input category, like field name, could be. And let's also add ID in here, and let's copy this and paste it. We're gonna make this input field of that type, and we have to type value as well, and that's gonna be string. Now let's copy handle input change and add it to our input in the form. So on change, let's pass event and handle input change. First, we're gonna have input enum dot. This is how we use enums in TypeScript. Input enum dot the name of the enum, and then this is going to return like title as a string. And then the next one we want to pass event target value. That is the value of what user started typing. And before adding the value, we can add an initial state to our input data. So by default, it's gonna, the object fields like title, description, URL are just gonna be an empty strings. So adding the last field in here, and now we can go back down to our input field and add after handle input change. We're gonna have value that equals to input data dot title, and so yeah, let's add that. Input data title, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to try see if it's updated. So now when I'm typing, I can see the fields changing. Now we want to apply this to our other input elements. So I'm just gonna copy paste it and change the title for the onChange argument as well as for the value. So doing the same thing for URL in here, and that should be it for the changes on our input. Now let's go back to where we have states created and add another state for errors. So let's see, we are gonna add this below input data and constant form error set form error if there's like any errors when saving this new tool. So, and the type for this one is going to be Boolean, and by default this is false. And now we're ready to start writing handle submit function. So constant handle form submit, and you will take in event as an argument, and we'll pass event prevent default because we don't want the page to get reloaded. Now we have to type event. At the top, I'm gonna import React because we need a type for form element from React. So in here, React form element, HTML form element is going to be our type. And after that, we can, I'll just like write a pseudocode of the steps we're gonna take. So we want to save data to Firebase. After we want to update the state of tools, so add our new tool. Finally, we need to clear form so your user can add a new state tool. So because we're adding this to Firebase, we need to make this function asynchronous, and let's write try catch. We'll take set form error, and if there is any error, we're gonna set form to true. If not, we can move with the try condition. At the top, we have to add a function add docs. That's a Firebase function, and we'll copy the collection because this is the collection we're working with, and we want to add doc to. So await add docs takes in two arguments. First one is the collection, so let's pass in tools collection. Next, what we have to do is we have to construct our new tool. So constant new tool, the type of this would be tool. Actually, we can make this a partial tool because some fields might be empty. And inside, let's define the type. And inside here, we collect the arguments from the state. So input data title, description, also input data description, and we have URL, input data URL. We're not passing the ID because IDs are auto-generated in the TypeScript. That's why one of the reasons we have partial tool as a type. Now let's actually move this because we initiate constant new tool. So after we do that, let's do await add doc, and as a second argument, we're gonna pass in our new doc, which is going to be this object new tool. So we went through all the steps except clear form. Let's do that right now. So set input data, we're going to set this to its initial state where all the fields are basically like a empty string. I'm going to remove this pseudocode, save it. And final step that we need for our form to be working is that we need to take this handle form function and pass it to our form using on submit. So form on submit equals handle form submit. And one thing, let's check that our button type is submit. So when users press, it is. So when users press add new tool, it triggers the submit function. And now so just double checking that it's there, and now we're ready to test our function. So I'm gonna type it in some fields in here for the tool description test. Let's test the URL as well and add new tool. So we can check in Firebase if the tool got added. Let's see. It's this one. But it did not update our list of tools, so forgot to add that, but we can go back to the submit function and let's remove this console log. And once we have the set tools, we can use that hook, and once it's saved to the Firebase, we can update our local state. So in here, set tools, and we're gonna take the previous tools and just append our new tool to the existing array of tools. So we can just do this structuring like that. And let's save it. For the toasts, we are going to use React Toastify. This is for like small user interactions to like trigger toast in the top, and in our use case we'll use this as when the tool gets saved to the database, we'll say, oh, it was saved successfully. So let's go ahead and install the tool first, and we can go now to their documentation to see how it can be used. So they have a nice setup here where you can configure it based on you're liking, like the colors, types, and then you can test it like this and it'll show up in the top right corner. So let's copy this one since it updated the code as well. And so for installation, we did install it already, and we probably need also a wrapper. So yeah, the toast container right here, we need to add that into our either the index page or the component that we are using this toast in. So in here, I'm first gonna go to the handle for submit function where we want to trigger this toast. So after it was added, I'll add it right here and just change the text, say to like something like save the tool successfully. Okay, now we have that. We need to import the toast container. Also, should not forget that we need to import their styling file, but it's all in the documentation. Let's copy and paste them in here, and also copy this container that basically wraps our element and then feeds the toast into it. And we can add that anywhere. It could be probably at the bottom is better for readability purposes, and let's save it. Now we're ready to try out. I'm gonna add one more tool in here. Also, now that we updated, we added set tool, it should also get added to the list as seen on the screen. So add tool, yeah, it was added, and then we have our toast right here. Great. Okay, we can change some, before we move on to edit functionality, we can change some styling in for example, on the router.tsx, we can change the background of the header, set it to the same as the rest of the app that we have. Also, I'm gonna remove this header like text and set something like a logo, for example. It would be nice to have. Also, let's set the text to white because it changed background color. Now the text was not visible anymore unless we change the color of it. And to make it look like more real logo, maybe I'm gonna remove the span and add the text of different like size. And let's change the text, just say something like AI tools, and I'm gonna tools, and let's change this into a paragraph, and then for anything that we want the different styling on, we can wrap it into a span. For example, in AI, the part we can add like a color, for example, like purple. So text and then purple, let's do 500. And then what are we? Oh, we have an extra. This should be P, because the parent of the span is paragraph. Tools AI, that looks better. Let's increase the font size of this one. So add a class name to the P, and that would be text. Let's do something like large, see how it looks. Maybe a little bit bigger is better, so let's go back in here, remove, I don't know where this breakpoint keeps adding, and 3XL. Now I'm gonna close out this just additional files that I have open, and from here we can go back to our index page, and from the table I'm gonna update this, and before we do the edit, I'm gonna create our tools, display them as cards. So that should be a pretty simple update. We just need to remove table head and update the table, turn that into a div. Also all of its other elements. We don't need tbody anymore. Same goes for table row, table data. And we're just gonna, after add the little styling to make the cards looking like a card. So yeah, let's first change this div elements and see how it looks like. Save this, and yeah, here it is. Now we need to remove the border on all the I'm gonna set this as a side so you guys can see what I'm doing, and we don't need the table class name. Let's make it as a grid, so grid columns. This we're setting how many columns we want per row. That would be like 3 columns in, and also let's add a gap so we don't have to add like margins in between every single one of them. So that's how it is now. Their height is a little bit different, so let's set all of the cards have the same height, and we can start updating this card. So adding a class name age, let's do 48, see how it looks like. Okay, and yeah, that's good for the sizing. And let's remove these borders inside the fields. So that's just needs to be the class name removed. Border slate. Yep. Oh, now we still have the border because we have the border class itself, and by default it's setting to white. And we can just also remove these two. For background, I'm also removing background styling because we're gonna set a gradient instead. And let's save this. We can also add a border to the card itself, so that would be here. Make also, it's like border radius, MD makes it rounded, and then add a little bit of shadow, which is like slate 900. And shadow, we also want that to be rounded because our card itself is rounded. Adding some padding so we can content has some space around before the card ends. And here we add background gradient to the right, so direction would be from left to right. It's horizontal, and then we have to pass like the hash of 2 colors or more if we want to be like which colors gradient is from. So let's start with from slate 800, and to make it maybe a little bit lighter, slate 700. Save it, see how it looks like. Okay, so maybe we don't need a border on this one, or maybe something that's very like almost in the same colors as the card background. Now let's update this text that we have for like title. I will set this as like almost the size of the header. So let's do XL. Oh, actually the class name is text XL. Also, let's add maybe a little bit margin at the bottom, and font weight, set it to bold so it makes it more like emphasis on it, more defined. And let's make this turn this card into a flag. So what I want to do is move this URL all the way to the down at the end of this card. So flex direction, setting it to column, and justify between. Because it is between, it leaves all the space in between all the elements. So I'm gonna wrap the title and description, as I want these two to be together at the top, into a one div that will push down the URL. And also let's make this change the color of the URL, make it a little bit darker. So text slate, not 200, maybe set like a 400. Okay, and that looks better. Also, we can turn this into like a link, clickable. So instead of div, let's set a, and then href to URL. For the icons, we'll use this library, Hero Icons. It is also created by creators of Tailwind, so it does work really well with it. And this is their GitHub page, where they also have in the README documentation. And we can copy, like, there's directions on how to install. We can copy this command npm install and run it into our application, and this is an example of how to use it. Okay, let's go first to our application, open terminal, paste npm install hero icons react, and going back to it, let's see how we can browse the hero icons. So I'm gonna open this in a new tab, and in the search box here I'll try to type what I'm looking for, so something like edit, and then we have 3 styles of icons. I'm gonna go with outline, and let's see, for outline they can be imported from hero icons react 24 outlines. I'm just gonna paste that here, and also add a name of the icon, which was pencil square icon. So that one in curly brackets, and then let's just copy an example that we can modify with our own. This icon will go inside the card, and it would be for when users want to edit the tool information, they can press it, and let's so I updated the name, and we can we're getting an error about the module. Let's go back and see what it is. Oh, I haven't wrapped them in the quotes, so let's turn that into a string and save it. So we're still getting an error. It says unexpected. Let's check that the package has been installed, so I'm gonna paste the name of the package here. Interesting. Okay, let's go copy the example directly, and check that it works and modify by our icon that we found later on. Maybe there's some misspelling in the icon name, so I'm gonna just paste beaker icon, and yeah, that doesn't show us error anymore, which is good. And let's also paste the implementation of it, where we have on line 130, so goes in here, and yeah, I think, oh, this is the error from the previous state. Okay, let's save this and check that we don't get any more errors. Okay, so it is showing up, so it was just the wrong copy of the package. Now we can change solid to outline and beaker to pencil square, and update here as well, and we have it. We can change also like the color of it and the form, because there's 2 pencil ones from their library, and we can, this one looks better, I think. Text blue, let's do slate, and some like lighter, darker color like 900, and save this. Now what we want to do is we don't want this pencil square showing up at all times. We only want when user hovers over the card. So how do we do that? It would be by group function. So I added group here and relative, because I also want to set this position of the icon absolute in terms of like its parent container. So let's do group hover block. So initially by default it would be hidden, and then when somebody hovers over, then it's gonna show up. And also absolute, it's gonna make it place it on the like 4 from the top, and on the right side also a little bit distance on the right side, and just a bit of padding. So now when we hover over, we should be seeing the icon, and let's remove the padding because it pushes away. So it's showing up on like for a little bit. Maybe we can add also cursor pointer so it's obvious that it is clicked. Now we will turn this fields that we have into editable form, and to manage like state of when it's editable or not, and add some logic into it, it's better to extract this tool cards as a separate component. So I'm gonna close out all the other folders, just open the shared, and here I'm gonna create a new file, name it tool card, and let's start defining our component. So the name of it would be tool card. And as for like the return statement, we can copy the UI that we already created from the index page. So I'm gonna set this to the side, and that's going to be from here. Let's copy, paste it, and once we have that, we also need to define the types of props that we'll be accepting. So first we can export type tool from index page so that we don't have to redefine it one more time. Let's also add an export default statement to the tool guard so we don't forget it later on. And going at the top of the file, here I'm gonna import the type that we just exported from tool, and let's see, we also need chakra UI, like the pencil square icon, but so yeah, the path for this one is going back, and let's move this one and start defining interface for the props. So interface tool card props, and we'll take in tool as prop that will be of type tool. And we can destructure it here, and on like the column pass the name of the interface. So I'm gonna copy this import statement for the hero icons that we are using. And let's also add the useState hook for React. This is because we wanna save the state as user starts updating some of this field. So let's define that state here. First, we can say if it's in an edit mode or not. So is edit, set is edit, use state, this is going to be Boolean, and by default it is false. Let's move this out and let's update this, set the initial state. And next we can define a function that like toggles the state. So toggle is edit, will take the state of the previous edit and set it to the opposite of previous, so that we can do that set is edit and prev is edit, and that equals to not is edit. And I'm gonna close this to the side so we have more space, and pencil square icon. Let's also add icons for like if it's in edit mode, then we're not gonna display this icon anymore, and instead we will display the save one and the close one. So let's say if is edit first, then display that. If it's not, let's look up for something we can use for save. So that one looks like a bookmark, maybe like check mark would be a better option. So yeah, here we have in the outline section once again, check. Let's copy that one and import it into our statement at the top. So we already have pencil square and icon import, so we can add that in the list. And something for exit, maybe close. We can use that X mark, so that would be X with the circle icon, and let's just copy their names. And we can place both of them right next to each other, and we're just gonna like update the colors of it. So check icon, let's move that and add the second circle icon. We're just gonna copy the styling of the pencil icon and paste it into them, and afterwards make slight modifications to this too. So first one, the circle one, the check mark one, just the hidden group hover block. We don't need that because it would be shown when the component is in an edit mode regardless, so it would never display on like hover or anything. And then I'm going to copy what's in check icon, paste it into the circle icon. Let's just change the color of it. We're going to set the check for green, and then the circle one that's going to be red. We can make this dark red. And finally, now, so tool card, we can import that into our index page and replace the div that we have created for it instead with the component. So let's do import card, a tool card, and it's from shared folder. Okay, and update the code that we have in here. Yeah, so let's select that and select tool card, and it so far only accepts one prop. So, but when we're mapping something, we also have to pass the key with the tool ID that's going to be unique for every tool, and then just the tool, and then it handles inside the component. Now we can see how the icons look like, and if we go hover over and press one, like we haven't added the edit function yet on the pencil square icon yet, so it will not, the check and the circle icon will not show up, but let's update that. And first I'm also going to change the color of, make it look more light, so it more visible. Yeah, that one looks better. And we can add now turn icon into a button and pass the toggle is added. So to do that, I'm gonna wrap it into a button and give this button a class name, and let's close the tag and place the icon inside it. Just gonna move this ending tag of the button after the icon, and we can also paste some of the classes for the button. It's gonna be btn ghost, meaning like background transparent, because that's what we want. We just want the icon to show up. As for on click, I'm gonna pass toggle is edit, and we are getting an error for maybe I missed some closing div tag, or that looks like extra. Let's note this. Oh, closing curly brackets, maybe it's here. No. Let's see, we can start closing out some of this. Oh, nope, it's not that. Yeah, I'm gonna close this and our conditional statement as well to see where we're missing a tag or maybe a bracket. Okay, now the issue's fixed, and we can go back into the code and open up this the code that I had collapsed. So let's do that, and same for our icons on the line 23. So we'll install this utility class clcx. It's a perfect way and very efficient way of writing conditional classes and styling for Tailwind. So we have different like options here, and then these variables that are passed determine if the variable is true, then it will add these classes. So let's install that in the terminal, and once it's done, we can close it out and import at the top of the toolcard file. So import clcx from the name of the package. And like I mentioned, defining classes is you can pass a list of classes to it that's gonna display it by default, and then you can add conditions in a very like simple way, like when object like key and value. So let's create a object, name it constant input classes. And the reason we want these conditional classes is because our fields, when the toolcard isn't going to be in edit mode, we want those fields to display as like a clickable and as a form. So let's create clcx object, and then as a parameters we pass list of classes. So background, transparent, and they have to be like of type string, so we have to wrap them in the quotes. Border, no border, also cursor pointer because they are clickable. And let's expand, not this, actually we want to turn the fields into also inputs. But first let's pass class name to the description, so clcx input classes, and then here we start with our conditional statement. So this background gray 900 would get added if the toolcard is in edit mode. So let's put that condition in there, and also we'll add another condition cursor text if it is in edit mode to make it look more as like a normal input. And let's move the hover logic and classes that we have on the icon onto the button itself. So like button also gets hidden since it's a parent component now and moves. Okay, so we have that, and let's add just a little bit of padding in here. And now our text component got turned into input. And let's place the check icon first, coming before like the circle icon. So I'm gonna move that, and what determines their position is how far are they from the right side. So right A would come first, and then right 4 would come second. So let's modify that and add a little bit of margin so they have space in between. So let me switch the right, and then if we set the right bigger, we won't need, so I'm going to set it to 12. We won't need like setting a margin. Okay, so now we have the check icon first. The next thing we can do is we can start writing a function that would save or update our tool. So let's first move input data and store as user starts typing and updating the tool. Let's store that form data. So I'm just gonna paste input data state here, and by default the only difference would be that the state won't be empty. The state would get already existing tool as an initial state. And then let's change this divs into input, so we let the users type in and update the value. So I'm gonna remove this A tag as well. This will get turned into input because they're also able to update URL. Okay, so we have on all three of those, tool, description, and the URL. Let's move this out. And yeah, so instead of going inside, they would be passed down to input as a value. So let's pass that. So this one is going to be input data.tool. And I'm going to copy this and modify for the others. This would be the description. And after that, we have, we're getting unterminated JSX. Let's see. Oh yeah, we need to remove the tool and URL pass it as a data. Okay, great. Now let's update classes for all three of them, because by default input a class is white and it has a border and squared. So I'm just gonna leave the previous class names that, like for example, tool had, and append that to the logic that gets updated. So let's do the same for the URL as well. So if you want to keep it text-late, it's very easy to do that. We just need to add it as one of the arguments in here. Yeah, clcx makes it pretty easy, but I don't see titles showing up at the top. So that might be, we might have misspelled the name, and let's see, or maybe it's something in the styling. Let's do text slate 50 to add the color. Oh, okay, so the element itself exists, but we need to update, instead of input data tool, we should use the field title. So let's save it, and now the title's showing up again. Let's change styling, add some padding. We're gonna have a bigger padding on horizontal than on vertical, so X4 and Y2. And let's move this out, see what else we need to change. We can add, since the card itself has rounded corners, we can add that in as well. So inside input classes, rounded, empty, and save it. Okay, now all the fields are showing up as input. And we can start writing a function for onClose. So what's going to happen on close is that user changes their mind, they don't want to update anymore. So first we'll turn off set is added to false, and set input data. So we're going to revert and put it back to the tool, and the changes will not be saved. Let's move this out and add the onChange also, so that when user starts typing, the state gets updated, because we have not added that on our input forms. And for the logic, we can already like copy what we have in the index.js TSX, and also export the enum, which is like type for our input fields. So let's paste the handle input change function here, and at the top let's import the input enum, and well, I'm gonna move this out and copy this. Let's paste it on all of our input fields. So just putting this in a curly brackets, and let's paste the whole line with the onChange prop and add that on the description. I just update the enum field, enum field, and also same thing for the URL. Now let's write an update function so we can finish working on this tool card. So for an update, we want the updated tool get stored on the Firebase, and this is also a Firebase tutorial. This would be like a CRUD from CRUD part. This is the update part. And we'll define that in index file because we already have like Firebase hook initiated over there. At the top, we need to import update docs function. That's the update function query that takes care of updating the doc in collection. So let's first get the doc reference. We take in the doc function, we pass in the Firestore, and also as a second argument, we need to pass the name of the collection, and after that, the ID of the doc itself. So this is basically grabbing our current instance of the object. And as an update tool, we're going to take in two parameters. First is going to be ID of the current tool that we're updating and the new tool itself, like the updated object. And this could be of type partial tool, as some of the fields might be empty. So let's, yeah, my auto-completion always fills it as opening and closing, like JSX tag. Yeah, let's start defining functions. So this is where we use update doc, we pass in the doc reference, and as a second argument, we pass in our new tool. So let's name this actually data, and then we can write the continue, get the data back to make sure that it has been stored successfully, and in that case I'm gonna copy the logic for that we have already for saving the new tool data and just update the wording that the tool has been updated successfully. And then in case of error, we want to catch that error and we want to log it out or set the error state. So yeah, let's do console log error and close out this function, copy, and we now need to pass it to our tool cards as we have the button to update over there. So let's say on update tool, and that let's name it, so the prop itself, we're going to name it on update, and then we're going to pass on update tool. Now moving on to the tool card, here in the type of props we're accepting, we need to also define that we're getting this function. And when defining function types, we have to indicate first what kind of arguments function is taking in. So here we already have that defined. And we also indicate what is the return statement. Since this is just an update, doesn't return anything, we say void. And update the destructuring of the prop, so we get in the function. And let's start defining handle update, and in here we'll pass the on update that we got via props. So yeah, let's call in there, and we need to pass in our arguments. First one is going to be tool ID. Once again, tool is a prop and ID is what we're passing, and then we can pass input data, which is the state, and it stores the new updated tool. Okay, now that we have our functions, we can pass them to our icons. So check icon on click, that's going to be the handle update. And then for close one, let's copy the name of the function that is on close. So we save that, and now one more thing that we can add on the handle input change is once the tool is saved, we can exit out of the edit mode. So in here, I'm just gonna add that same way we have it on close function. Save it, and let's reload our page and update one of the tools. So maybe this one, I'm gonna just change the name and save it. It got updated, and here we have, yep. Another piece that we have to update since we built update doc functionality is adding the tool itself to the Firebase, because right now when we're adding a tool, what we're doing is we're taking the new tool that user input in the form, and we're just adding to our tool's state. But what we also need for update function is the ID itself. So if we go, for example, look at handle update, here on update, we're passing the ID, right? But on tool creation, we're not adding the tool with the ID. So what we can do is we can create a reference, and this is a very simple change. We just need to return ID back from Firebase when the tool is created, and add that as well to our tools list. So instead of just new tool that user consists of user input, we're also gonna add ID, and then this ID would be docref, and then .id, we are gonna take the fields of new tool and then destructure, so all the fields are gonna be added into this new object. So right now we can test this if we create a new tool and fill out the fields for it. Once we have description for the test and some URL, and save add new tool. Here the tool got added, right? And we can check that whether or not it has an ID, and this is very simple to check. If you don't have React DevTools on your Chrome, make sure to install so you don't have to do console log. You can just inspect the props, and if we expand tool here, we have the ID that we can later on use for updating. So if we want to change this and type it in some other text and save it, now this will get stored successfully. As for the deletion of the tool, the logic is very similar to the update. We just need to use a different function name. So let's go where we have update defined, and this is going to be inside index file, and at the top we can import delete doc, and I'm just gonna show you guys real quick. I'm not gonna actually implement it, but it would be just a simple change of handle that should be on update tool. So here we take doc reference, and instead of update tool, we're gonna do a delete doc, and then you can update the logic afterwards accordingly. One thing, it's not